You're listening to Win-Win, an entrepreneurial community with your host, Ben Wolf.
And welcome to Win-Win, an entrepreneurial community. I am pleased to introduce my two guests today who are going to share about their new field guide for taking clarity breaks. And if we have time, hopefully talk about how to build a successful podcast. Ask everybody to subscribe, leave a review, follow, like, whatever the method is on the particular platform that you are listening to this or watching it. And beyond that, I want to get into introducing our guests today. Both of them are co-hosts of the Entrepreneurial Operating System EOS-focused Tractionville podcast at tractionville.com, and I'll include all the websites and links in the descriptions and postings. They are the co-authors of a just newly released guide to taking the EOS Entrepreneurial Operating System recommended clarity breaks. The book is called the Clarity Field Guide, and again, links to that in the description. And there's also clarityfieldguide.com. You can get more information about that, find out about getting them as speakers. So the first of our two guests is Chris White. He's a certified EOS implementer with Traction in Florida. He's also the author of a book a few years ago called Process Triage, a guide to building repeatable, sustainable, and scalable core processes. And our other guest is Benj Miller, the co-host of Tractionville, and also an EOS implementer with the Benj Miller Collective in Atlanta, Georgia. And he's the founder and creative director of Syrup Marketing. And both very interesting guys. And so welcome to the Win-Win Entrepreneurial Community Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Ben.
And so I know it's not often that I have two guests at the same time, so I'll just ask both of you to answer this question. And that is, if you could just give us a quick 2-minute history on where you came from and how you came to be, working on Clarity Field Guide and everything you're doing now, so people have a context for what we're talking about.
Go ahead, Ben.
Chris.
I knew we were both going to. All right, I'll go first.
They beat you to it.
All right, so the quick 411 on me. Grew up in a very entrepreneurial family, third generation. Never thought I'd be an entrepreneur. And went off and had a little career with a Motorola distributor. And that's when I sort of had my epiphany that I wasn't building anything like my grandparents or my parents. And so I took that entrepreneurial leap, little plug there for Gino's new book. But yeah. I took that entrepreneurial leap and had a partner in a first software company, had some great success, parlayed that into another software in another market, and had another great success, and it was a lot of fun. And at that time, my partner and I decided to go our separate ways because we had different visions. And it was during that downtime, I started another company with my wife. It wasn't very sexy or fun. It was profitable, my heart wasn't in it. Mm-hmm. And one day I got a book in the mail, and it was called Traction, Get a Grip on Your Business. I never heard of it, never heard of Gino, never heard of EOS. And it was given to me by a CEO of a company who wanted me to join his board. And I read the book, blew me away, wished I had it in my companies. And I sat on a team for 2 years with an implementer from Detroit. We scaled that company, we sold it, and it was one of the best rides I'd ever been on. And the implementer walked up to me and he just said, "Chris, I get the feeling you think you can do what I can do." And I said, "Hell yeah, I can. I got the entrepreneurial scars. And I also started out at school to be a high school teacher and a coach." So the book Traction brought my life full circle. And wow. Today I'm a teacher and a coach.
Nice, Benj.
I will try to be that succinct. I did not grow up in an entrepreneurial family, but as I reflect on that, they had one of the key attributes of the entrepreneur, which is kind of that resourcefulness and grit that if you want something, then you can figure it out. And so I took that into my adulthood. I started after a couple, tries to work at other firms, agencies, started my own agency, and realized quickly that I had no idea what I was doing. I was way out over my skis. We had a couple good growth years that I had no idea how to manage. And so looking at myself in the mirror, it was like, do I, hang this up, go get a job like a normal person? Do I scale this back to a couple people where it's just easy, or do I learn how to run a business? And I chose that third path and absolutely fell in love with the idea of business building. It was then when we were merging that company with another company, and somebody that I had known and respected and worked with in another element, Tom Bauer. I heard he was an implementer. I'm like, all right, we're doing this with Tom when we're putting these two things together. And that changed my life the same way it did Chris's, in that it gave me language to not even try to be an integrator anymore, but really live in that visionary seat. And that created the ability for me to go and start 8 other companies, buy a few, sell a few. One of those was where I met Chris with 90.io, the software for companies running on EOS. Chris and I really enjoyed working together in that element. And so when we stepped back from that, Chris baited me into doing this podcast thing. And then the book, how it came to be, was really, it was a fewfold. I think Chris and I, whether it's on the podcast or whether it's sitting behind his house in the hot tub, we love the deep question. And it's the enter the danger, it's the scary. And our own person is sometimes the scariest place to go, when you have to go inside. And the subtitle for the book is The Answers That No One Else Can Give You. Right. So we tend to be scrolling our Instagram feed. We tend to be looking around, watching the news. We are hunters and gatherers in an information age. So we are constantly addicted to hunting and gathering information. But we need to stop and ask ourselves some hard questions. So I think that along with watching our senior leaders struggle with this idea of taking a clarity break, like how do we stop working in the business to think about the business, to think about myself, to think about myself in the business, and to ask all those questions that can actually create breakthrough just by asking the question. Right. We wanted to give them something very practical. So this is not a book that you read and then put on the shelf and never think about again. You're like, oh yeah, it was good. No, this is like your field guide. You're taking it with you on your clarity break, and it's going to help guide you through.
Okay, so an interesting thing there, Ben, if I can, when Benj and I were formulating this idea, right? I don't know that we said it exactly at the same time, but we both said, I probably got 3 empty journals right now in my office. I bought them because they look cool. It looked like something I could commit to, but I never did. We both had that experience. So we were like on the same page with what we didn't want this field guide to be. We didn't want it to end up like those that are on our desks. So, and I think that's like a major difference with how we created this and how it's going to be something. There's not a big barrier to journaling. We've made it easy, right? And it's just getting over that initial resistance of having to capture your thoughts and then write them out. And all we've done is trick you. We just hit you with some questions. Right. And then boom, the minute you put your pen to paper, you're journaling.
Well, so I think one thing that you guys basically already implicitly hinted at is the fact that even people who are using EOS, and certainly people out there can benefit from clarity breaks if they're not using EOS, but and I can certainly relate, like what are clarity breaks? Like, what are clarity breaks?
Yeah. So, Gino created clarity breaks as a tool to help leaders and managers of business protect their confidence, to spend time in quiet reflection, to think about what their accountability is in the business. So this could be an owner, this could be a leader, this could be a manager. And it's the value is to sit in a quiet space with your own thoughts, to think about maybe the past quarter, right? You could think backwards, you could think present, you could think future, but the act of taking that thought down your arm, out your wrist into a writing utensil and on paper seems to make it real. It's kind of like when you're in class in college, right? Statistics show that you have a higher rate of comprehension if you actually write out your notes, right? So the real benefit is just there's that time spent in quiet reflection to protect your own confidence, and to just have free thinking about whatever it is that comes in and out. And you know, at the front of the book, we have this great quote from James Mattis, previous Secretary of Defense, 4-star general, Marine Corps. And if you'll indulge me, I'd like to read this because this will help
Sure.
kind of answer that for you, right? So General Mattis says, if I was to sum up the single biggest mistake of senior leadership in the information age, it's lack of reflection. Solitude allows you to reflect while others are reacting. We need solitude to refocus on prospective decision making rather than just reacting to problems as they arise. When I read that, it just, you know, solidified it for me. We are on the right path here. And you know, there are a lot of famous people that journal, you know, but if you go back 25,000 years, right? Marcus Aurelius, you can go, his journal, his personal journal that was meant for him is called Meditations. So you can look back in history, you can look across sports, religion, business, a lot of high performers journal.
And what, let me put it this way also, like what happens to me when I don't take clarity breaks? Like what's the difference?
So one of the, where Chris started was this idea of protecting your confidence. And the story, the illustration that I love is if your business is building a road through the jungle, it's a grind. It's hot, sweaty. You've got big machinery, loud noises, lots of people. You're in the woods. You can't see, you know, past 50 yards, maybe even 50 feet. So you're just plowing away. You're cutting down trees, making the land flat, pouring asphalt over and over and over. The idea of the clarity break is somebody's got to take a second and climb a tree and look out where we're going and see if we're even going the right direction. Are we cutting a path in circles? We weaving and spending extra miles and extra money going through this jungle? Or are we doing the right thing? Is our hard work in the grind, in the business, what it needs to be? Or are we going the wrong direction? Or should we even be building this road? Is this the right road to be building? So those are some of the questions that you start to ask. And when you get the confidence that, okay, we're going the right way, we're on a good pace, this is what we should be doing, I can climb back down that tree, fully energized, fully confident to go lead my people to keep plowing that road.
It reminds me of the famous Yogi Berra quote. He said, if you don't know where you're going, you'll end up someplace else. I don't know if you guys use that one.
That's right.
Oh, yeah, that's a great
right.
one.
But it's so that's a great quote. So so mechanically now, how do you take a clarity break?
Well, you know, it's really up to you. It could be 1 hour a month. It can be daily. I happen to do it daily. It's part of my morning battle rhythm. I think, you know, there's a little bit of a barrier, right, to getting started. And again, hopefully we've made it a little easier for people to start by asking them these questions. And I think as people get into it, they're going to enjoy it, where they might do it a little more often than maybe they'd interact with another journal.
Right.
But it's really up to that person. But you know, for me, I do it daily. Some people do carve out, you know, a half hour once a week. Some people carve out, I know I have a client that takes 2 hours a month. He calls it's his visionary / clarity break time. So it's really up to the individual person.
Uh-huh. How do you use
So
the field? Sorry, Benj, go ahead.
I think you're going to ask exactly what I was going to weigh in. So that's part of the answer to that is why we created the guide, is because tactically it's challenging. You know, we teach people pick a time, pick a rhythm, pick a place.
It's important that you commit to a certain rhythm as opposed to just randomly do it when you feel like it.
So yes, I think it absolutely is, but you've got to give yourself the grace to find your own rhythm.
Yeah.
So, and I just say, like, look, if you're comfortable with a 10-minute clarity break, make it 20. If you're comfortable in a half an hour, make it 45 minutes. If you're comfortable in a half day, pick a full day. So like there's some encouragement to push it,
Right.
But you've got to find your own rhythm. And then the other thing is when we do find that, historically, we've been stuck staring at a blank piece of paper. So the premise of the book is that there's questions that we can guide you on to help you, but not all questions are appropriate for every season. So what we've illustrated is what we've found in nature and the idea of a creator's cycle. And we're all creators as leaders. And so we go through this cycle just with our being, with our emotions, our energy. We go through these cycles, and the cycle is like spring. It's like planning tons and tons of ideas. We've got really strategic thinking. We're probably in jeopardy of overcommitting, like just endless, boundless energy in this planning session. And then we go into executing. The summer, this is when we're going to get stuff done, hyper focus on what we're working on. The interesting thing that happens between the summer and the fall, the executing and what we call the doldrums, is whether you're successful or whether you're an absolute failure in the summer when it comes to that harvest, we all end up in the doldrums. Even the success didn't give us what we thought we wanted, or the failures just wore us down, and we end up in the doldrums. And the doldrums is the fall. You want your fireplace and cozy blanket and your latte, pumpkin spice latte, all those comforts. We want to go internal. We start asking deep questions. It's not necessarily the right time to answer some of those deep questions. Sometimes it feels like depression or just a super lack of energy. But then we start to move out of that. We start to move into the winter. And in the winter, the cocooning season is when we start to transition. That's a great time of personal growth, of almost a Sabbath. You're building that inner peace, your solitude, your confidence back up to go right back in. You wake up one day and you're full on, brains rocking, whiteboards getting filled up. You're back in that planning energy mode. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that we do is help people understand these seasons. And then we have a quick little 1-page assessment. So every time you end up sitting down for your clarity break with this book, you can take this one little assessment. Just if you're not conscious of what season you're in, figure out what season you're in, and then ask the questions that are appropriate to that season. It's like if somebody's throwing a punch at you, you want to use the energy of their punch against them, not try and fight against that energy. So we want to do the same things with these seasons. We want to work with that flow and that energy, not against it, or else, we're just creating a losing battle.
Right. So people can go to the website, the clarityfieldguide.com, or use the book, help figure out if they're not clear, like which season they're in, and then kind of tailor the questions that they use as their starter questions for journaling during these clarity breaks, to get their juices flowing and thinking in
exactly,
in a more focused way.
Yeah. Ben, you when you were asking about sort of the cadence and that, you made me think of something. Benj and I both are huge fans of an author named Stephen Pressfield, and he wrote a book called Turning Pro, and it's a great book. I highly recommend it. He's got several of them, but in this specific book, Benj and I really like. He talks about the difference between like an amateur and a pro. Mm-hmm. And when you asked me about the cadence, I thought of that because an amateur is going to journal when they feel like it, right? Whereas a pro, regardless of how they feel, they journal. Like they keep their cadence. They don't skip it. Right. Whatever that is, daily, weekly, monthly.
Some discipline.
But that you've got to build that muscle, right? So just start with one and keep going, but have the mindset that you want to be a pro. And there's plenty of case studies out there that show the benefit of journaling, right? So I'm not going to go into that. People can research it, but I challenge people. It's like, hey, challenge yourself to leave the amateur status and turn pro. Right. And regardless of how you feel about it, put it on your calendar, whatever cadence it is, and don't miss it. Go do it. Regardless of how you feel, go do it. Create that muscle memory.
And it's not turning pro about being a journalist or a journaler. We believe this is essential to being to bringing all of yourself into the business and to being the leader that you're called to be, and to be able to lead the vision of the organization, you've got to take these times out.
Right. That it actually, what you're saying now also, Chris, about that kind of discipline, so that your insights know where to find you because you're there at the same time every day or week or month or whatever. It reminds me of something Stephen King says in his book On Writing about being a writer. And he compares his muse, like his inspiration in writing, to just like this guy smokes a cigar and, just kind of like puts his feet up and gives him good ideas sometimes. And he just says that the way that he doesn't show up right away, but if he writes his minimum 2,000 words a day, that's his particular discipline. He writes that every day, then, and if he just keeps that up long enough, eventually, then his muse, the hairy guy with the cigar, knows where to find him when he's ready to give ideas.
Yeah.
But if he's not there on a regular basis, or if he's not following the discipline, then the muse doesn't know where to find him. So it just what you're saying reminded me of that story. Great. Or that thought of his. What about you guys? Can you share something personal? Either one of you, I don't know who to direct it to, but either one of you guys share something personal on Clarity Breaks. How has it made a concrete impact on you? One story, one example.
I'll start with the consciousness around the stage of the cycle. Our last level 10 meeting that I had in one of my teams.
That's a weekly leadership team meeting for those not already familiar with the EOS.
Thank you. We had some big strategic issues on the list that were probably top of the list. We probably should have been working on those. And I just said, hey guys, I've got a confession. I'm in the doldrums, and it hit me pretty hard yesterday, midday. And so I really don't think we should be trying to answer some of these questions. Mm-hmm. But because we had this common language around what that looks like, and, there's so much, we are not a gracious society, and we are especially ungracious with ourselves. So to have the ability to give yourself the grace to understand that you're in this season, there's nothing wrong with fall. Like nature created fall. We have to go through fall. You can't rush out of fall, right? But I'm in fall. So let's be in fall, because we can't be in spring. We're not, it's just not the time. And so to have that consciousness and the grace for me to be able to admit it, and the language for my team to be able to hear it and understand it, it was like, oh yeah, cool. Let's move on. Let's get some of the, let's go to these tactical type issues and knock those out.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate that.
For me, open and honest, I wasn't doing clarity breaks. I just couldn't get. Stephen Pressfield talks about resistance with a capital R, and it's interesting because you quoted Stephen King, and Stephen Pressfield talks about the muse too, and I was explaining to him some of my difficulties or struggles with that, and he said, Chris, he said, yes, I'm a novelist, I'm an author, I'm a screenwriter, and however old he is, in his 60s or whatever, but he said, I wake up every morning and I go through my daily battle rhythm, and at about 10 a.m. I sit down in front of my typewriter and I roll up a blank piece of paper. And that blank piece of paper is staring back at me, and it's messing with me. Like self-doubt starts to creep in. Oh, who are you to think you can fill this page with something someone would find interesting? Or hey, why don't you just go walk the dog right now? Or you need to go grocery shopping, anything but right. He calls that resistance with a capital R. And he said, Chris, yes, I've reached, some level of stature as an author and all that, but every day resistance is staring back at me. And so he helped me understand what I was dealing with. I was dealing with resistance. Right. And so he kind of set that framework for me. Once I got that, I'm like, okay, I'm going to process those feelings, but I'm not going to let that inner dialogue of self-doubt take over. I need to stop being an amateur. I got to turn pro regardless of how I'm feeling. And I got to get in there, and kind of like your thing about King doing 2,000 words a day. He just said, just start writing, Chris. The act of writing, just start writing, and you're beating resistance. But you got to build that muscle, and you got to do it in a rhythm, right? So that it becomes just part of who you are. And you'll be, but the battle with resistance doesn't go away.
Right. No, I appreciate it. I mean, would you guys, is there anything else that comes to mind that you guys think we should, as they always talk about backfill, anything on this topic that I missed or I didn't ask about that's top of mind with clarity breaks or how to use the field guide?
Well, you know, one of our healthy rules in EOS is what we teach our clients, right? Is to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? And for me, you know, the whole journaling thing made me a little uncomfortable. I wasn't sure what to write or how to write or even good enough to write. And I think what we've created is going to lower that barrier. And all I would say is, you know, try it one time and see how it goes. It just starts with that one step. And hopefully we've created a tool that allows them to come back multiple times and fight that resistance.
That's awesome. Look, so I really appreciate you guys coming on. People can check out the Clarity, I'm sorry, not the Clarity, clarityfieldguide.com to get information on the Clarity Field Guide and, you know, find the book, find out information, talk to Chris or Benj. Obviously, they can help you with EOS implementation too. Check out their podcast, tractionville.com, which focuses on, you know, EOS thought leaders and EOS companies on how they could more effectively use or how they are using the EOS tools to get more of what they want from their businesses. And I really appreciate you guys coming on. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Our pleasure.
All right, awesome. And we'll see everybody else on the other side. Thank you. All the best.
You're listening to Win-Win, an entrepreneurial community with your host, Ben Wolf.